Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Genesis chapter 30. It's another one of these monster chapters. But that's okay, it's got a lot of detail in it. Even a little bit of Harry Potter's sorcery. But yeah, if you recall, the last little bit, Leah was unloved, but she was still getting children by Jacob, and his beloved wife, Rachel. Well, the first part of this is kind of about her. Kind of. Another trick comes up again. Don't know what trigger warnings to attach to this, but without any further ado, let's get into Genesis chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she had borne Jacob no children, she became envious of her sister. And Rachel said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I shall die." Jacob was incensed at Rachel and said, "Can I take the place of God, who has denied you fruit of the womb?" She said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Consort with her so that she may bear on my knees, and that through her I too may have children." So she gave her maid Bilhah as concubine, and Jacob cohabited with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. Indeed, he has heeded my plea and given me a son." Therefore she named him Dan. Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, "A fateful contest I wage with my sister. Yes, and I have prevailed." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as concubine. And when Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son, Leah said, "What luck!" So she named him Gad. When Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, Leah declared, "What fortune!" meaning, "Women will deem me fortunate." So she named him Asher. Once at the time of the wheat harvest, Reuben came upon some mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Was it not enough for you to take away my husband, that you would also take away my son's mandrakes?" Rachel replied, "I promise. He shall lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came home from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You are to sleep with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he laid with her that night. God heeded Leah, and she conceived and bore him a fifth son. And Leah said, "God has given me my reward for having given my maid to my husband." And she named him Issachar. When Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son, Leah said, "God has given me a choice gift. This time my husband will exalt me, for I have borne him six sons." So she named him Zebulun. Last she bore him a daughter and named her Dinah. Now God remembered Rachel. God heeded her and opened up her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." So she named him Joseph, which is to say, "May the Lord add another son for me." After Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Give me leave to go back to my homeland. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, that I may go, for well you know what services I have rendered you." But Laban said to him, "If you will indulge me, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me, and I will pay, and on your account." And he continued, "Name the wages due from me, and I will pay you." But he said, "You know well I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For the little you had before I came has grown too much, since the Lord has pleased you wherever I turned. And now, when shall I make provision for my own household?" He said, "What shall I pay you?" And Jacob said, "Pay me nothing. If you do this thing for me, I will again pasture and keep your flocks. Let me pass through your whole flock today, removing from them every speckled and spotted animal, every dark-colored sheep, and every spotted and speckled goat. Such shall be my wages. In the future, when you go over my wages, let my honesty towards you testify for me. And if there are among my goats any that are not speckled or spotted, or any sheep that are not dark-colored, they got there by theft." And Laban said, "Very well. Let it be as you say. But that same day he removed the streaked and spotted he-goats, and all the speckled and spotted she-goats, every one that had white on it, and all the dark-colored sheep, and left them in charge of his sons. And he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob was pasturing the rest of Laban's plot. Then Jacob got fresh shoots of poplar, and of almond and plane, and peeled white stripes in them, laying bare the white of the shoots. The rods that he peeled he set up in front of the goats in the troughs, the water receptacles that the goats came to drink from. Their mating occurred when they came to drink, and since the goats mated by the rods, the goats brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted young. But Jacob dealt separately with the sheep. He made these animals face the streaked or wholly colored dark animals in Laban's flock, and so he produced special flocks for himself, which he did not put in with Laban's flocks. Moreover, when the sturdier animals were mating, Jacob would place the rods in the troughs in full view of the animals so that they mated by the rods, but the feebler animals he would not place them there. Thus the feeble ones went to Laban and the sturdy to Jacob. So the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks, maidservants and manservants, camels and asses. Well, let's just start at the beginning. Rachel and Leah are in this weird competition to see who can produce some more children. Now, this would be of more importance in ancient times than it would be today, but they're even using their maidservants as proxies for themselves just so that they can one-up each other. Rachel, gives her servant Bilhah to Jacob. Now, let's analyze this from Jacob's perspective. He's the master of the household, but the servants that are assigned to his wife, technically they have authority over him. And he's walking around like a king in this circumstance because he has all these women that they're even trading mandrakes. They're trading fruits and vegetables for the right to be the one to be with him next. Obviously, Jacob was a pretty attractive guy for all this to happen. And he's pretty good at what he does. I mean, the whole episode with taking care of the sheep and the flocks and stuff like that. This guy, he's being presented as a shepherd, but he's still saying, let me go home to my parents' place because I got a lot more wealth there. Jacob knows he is among the divine, even though, well, not the divine, that's an improper word, among the numinous, who has a closer connection to the divine. And Laban, his mother's brother, is abusing him. 7 years, 14 years for 2 wives, then another 7 years, so he'll give him some goats and stuff like that. We're concentrating on the goats. There's camels and she-asses and servants as well, depending on how you want to define servants. It wouldn't be too far to say slaves, but there is a difference between a servant and a slave. A slave is a slave, and they're basically your extra pair of hands and eyes. A servant is someone that you retain and you pay. They're still not technically a slave because you don't have the power of life and death over them, but at the same token, for lack of better, think of a butler. What you kind of expect from Batman with Alfred, where Batman says, Alfred, get me 3 tins of caviar, a live rhinoceros, and peacock livers. And Alfred goes out and makes sure all that is there by the time Bruce Wayne gets back. It's kind of the situation Jacob is in. I hate to use a comic book to illustrate the point, but yeah, that's the best, most commonly available example I could think of that fits what's going on here. And they very well might have been slaves as well. It just says maidservants and manservants. There's a big interpretation difference, but it's not specified, so we got to move on. So now we have this running total. Leah has given him 6 sons, including Judah. Yeah, Judah, from who the modern tribe of the Jews come from. Yeah, that's Leah, the weak-eyed one. Rebekah's son Joseph, is the one that saves them from their famine in Egypt. And I think at the time this was being written, there was still some contention. Judah was always a dominant leader tribe, but Joseph always had the ability to step back and say, we were the ones that saved the nation. It holds a lot. Like the Gandhi family in India. They've been the center of a lot of controversy, but they can always point back to the patriarch, Mahatma, and say, look what we did for the country. And they still wind up getting elected. And it's like in Canada, where our present prime minister is basically being elected because of his last name. But that tribe disappeared. We're going to get to that in the future. The only question is, mandrake is a root. What's so special about a mandrake that Rachel needed it so bad she was willing to trade access to her husband for a night, to the other wife? So this is a very peculiar thing. Mandrakes are used in witchcraft. And this may be ultimately why the Josephite tribe was pushed to one side. Mandrakes are also used in soups and vegetables, but the urgency where Rebecca is trying to have children, and the the mysterious thing is Leah gives Rebecca these mandrakes, which you have to pick at a certain time of the day because otherwise their scream is going to blind you. Mandrakes have a really interesting history. And as soon as she has the mandrakes, God remembers Rachel and gives him a son, Joseph. And then you have Jacob doing this Harry Potter business of, putting sticks that he has carved to show the speckled stuff in front of the goats, and then they mate in front of them, become whatever that he has chosen. Yeah, this is really steeped in magic. And that's something that makes biblical purists uncomfortable, but I'm going to call it as I see it. You got a desperate woman using folk traditions that apparently go back thousands of years further than I thought they did until this very moment. And yeah, one gets a child, the other one gets more goats. So we can see, through the power of the Lord and a little bit of sorcery on the side, Jacob is doing very well in his employment with his uncle. It's actually interesting, just like Jacob says, you're doing well because of me. And Laban says, you're right, I'm doing well because of you. God told me that. So stick around, kid. Let's both get rich together. Jake's like, oh man, I want to go home and, visit my parents and all that family. Remember, Esau swore that he was going to kill him. But Jacob is still determined to go back into this. All very unusual. But for now, we're going to leave it because chapter 31, again, we got another doozy coming up. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, buy a book. Link is in the comments. Everything you do for this channel helps it out. We are not currently monetized, although maybe in the future when you're listening to this, it might have happened. It's not something I'm really looking for. I want the views, the monetary cares I'm less interested in. Not that I don't need money, we all do, but I'm not one of these rich people with 10 billion things. So, that being said, thank you for listening, and we hope you have a fantastic day.